welcome to Table Groups. I'm Allison Lawrence, and I'm excited to be able to start this conversation today. This week I wanted to talk about actually a conversation I had last week, and last Tuesday I had a chance to plan and dream about the future ministry opportunities that we might have here at Fayetteville First United Methodist Church, and I was having this conversation with another staff member. And the conversation revolved around all of the unknowns about our public health situations and how it relates to our ministries and how we move forward, what it looks like. You know, you get the idea. In the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of being socially distant, in the midst of virtual worship, in the midst of isolation, of increased violence, of increased political divisions, in the midst of mistrust of all sources of information and of news, in the midst of all that seems to be swirling around like an ever-increasing storm, a storm of unrest and a storm of fear. In the midst of all of that, as we talked, me and this staff person, I strangely began to get excited. I began to have all of the anxieties that were began to building in me, they just began to disintegrate. And I hesitate to tell you this part because, well, it may sound like I've kind of lost my mind, but I heard a voice. Now, some might think that it's the isolation getting to me, but I promise you, I heard a voice so clear and so concise. I didn't hear emptiness and I didn't hear despair. I didn't hear anger or fear or frustration. I heard hope. I heard a voice in my head saying, "Behold, I am doing a new thing." Now, yes, that is scripture. Yes, I have heard it before. I've read it before. I've studied it before. Yet in that singular moment, I knew it was a word of promise, a promise for us, for today. It was a word reminding us of God's creative work of love and of healing and of redemption. From Isaiah 43, God is speaking to the people who have been exiled to Babylon, who have no temple. They have no temple where they can worship. They have no real connection to one another or to their Israelite roots. They live in this Babylonian culture, which they feel so disconnected from their ancient histories. And they looked back at their deliverance from Egypt. And when they do that, God tells them through the prophet Isaiah, he says, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" Now that's from Isaiah 43, verses 18 through 19. And God did in fact do a new thing. The Israelites were released from their captivity in Babylon, and they were returned to their home. And yet, the new thing that God did was not merely their release from captivity. It was bigger than that. It was the work that God did within their hearts. "Behold, I am doing a new thing." Arguably, the strongest lesson they learned during their exile was that God was not tied to the temple. God's power and presence is with God's people even when the temple is destroyed. Their story reminds me of the song. Hopefully you'll remember it. "I am the church and you are the church." Maybe today, even more than just 6 months ago, maybe today we understand that favorite chorus, "The church is not a building," better than we ever have before. And like the Israelites, we know that God is not tied to any building. In our socially distanced exile, we have a choice to make. Will we flail around in despair, or will we trust in the promise of hope? Of hope that even in the midst of the unknown, God is doing something new. Can you trust in that? Can you trust in God? Can you trust in the hope of something new? I hope that as you have these conversations this week in your table groups, that you'll be able to explore ways that you can see that in fact God is truly doing a new thing.